the disintegration of print journalism is a really major issue, and it carried baseball and promoted baseball, for decades, for 100 years, basically, give or take. And you're right, there's very little left of that. But if you were a serious fan, Ray, which you're clearly not, you'd be following the Celtics online, and you'd have a plethora of sites and opportunities to investigate, to tell you all about their players that you can't recognize. The more telling thing is, do you know the name of the best Marlins pitcher?
No,
Okay.
I
Do you
couldn't
know?
name a single person on the Marlins
Could you tell me?
or the Dolphins or the
You don't know
Heat.
who the Dolphins quarterback is?
No, I know
No.
he's a black guy, right?
I think he's a Hawaiian mixed race.
Oh,
His name is Tua. His name is Tua, and I
okay.
can't pronounce his last name. Well, then I think that this is about you, not about the world. There are plenty of heavily invested, and that word is chosen specifically because of the gambling, the rise of gambling on spectator sports, enabled by the great current Supreme Court in 2018 when they ruled that it was a matter of states' rights that you could stage all these lotteries, et cetera, and promote bets on everything, everything. What's the next pitch? You know, who's going to be the winner? What's the score going to be? You name it, you can bet on it now. And there's concern, and there's concern for good reason, because the Cleveland Indians star closer was, sidelined for being involved in a betting scandal. One of the managers who's just quit because his family was being threatened by losses. You screwed up the spread. I mean, players have told me that they get death threats and text messages saying, you should have get only struck out four. I said five. Gambling and the dissociation of people from actual interest in what they're watching, less interest in the action and interest instead in the action, the Las Vegas action, is endemic throughout sports. And I think there's a crisis coming. There's going to be a huge scandal. And for baseball specifically, um, I understand why they went all in along with all the other sports, but they had more of a PR problem than other sports because they had been beating their breasts since 1919, scandal with the White Sox, and say it ain't so, Joe. And had, we're the sport that's against gambling. We're never gonna, we have standards, and we have a sign in every locker room saying, if thou shalt not bet. Well, guess what? So what? It's 100 years later. Well, there's money to be made. And that leads, I think, to the other perception people have, which is that everything is about optimization. If there's something they can make money on, trust me, they will. And that leads to how expensive it has become. I mean, baseball was the game that you could go with your buddy, after school and sit in the bleachers for 50 cents. And if you're old enough, maybe a little older than 25 cents. So it's become, and while baseball is still less expensive than sports played less often, I mean, to get an NFL seat, and you have to buy a premium package, and license rights and all sorts of stuff. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. But baseball has the bigger problem because it has such big inventory, by which I mean so many seats to fill for so many games, 162 a year. And if you watch a game on television, which evidently you have not, you'll see wide swaths of empty seats in the outfield, and sometimes down low in the grandstands too. Um, so it's not a good look, and it sends a message nobody cares, and that has been borne out in statistics. That as the game got slower and slower, thanks to analytics, But, people couldn't stand sitting still that long. It's a 19th century construct. People were still using pocket watches when baseball was created. Basketball's an old game too. It's true. People, have been dribbling balls for a long time, but institutionally, baseball is much older than either the NFL or the NBA. And as newer industries, they were more supple in accommodating themselves to the change in the way we think and the time we can bring to attend to any subject. I have a study, cite a study in there in the book about from a professor of informatics, who measured the decrease in time that a worker working on a computer could attend to the task over 2 decades, and it's shocking. It's not as bad as the goldfish that Time magazine erroneously cited, but it's bad. And so baseball got itself in a fix because analytics have made football and basketball more exciting, and it made baseball slower and more boring. And that was the dilemma.